and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Coming this month on Patreon is my interview with concert deviser, presenter, the artistic and educational director of the National Children's Orchestras of Great Britain, and my old desk partner, Catherine Arledge. This month also sees another conductor returning to answer 10 brand new questions on a series called The Mic Test. And this month, it's the new music director of the Birmingham Opera Company, Alpesh Chauhan. To find out how to subscribe and hear these interviews, plus many other things, open up the show notes below, and for as little as £5 a month, you can gain access to a treasure trove of brand new conducting-based content. Today, I conduct a conversation with a conductor who, over a very long and distinguished career, has had positions with orchestras in New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and his native Switzerland. He was also director of one of the world's most prestigious music festivals for 6 years. It's my great pleasure to welcome Matthias Bammert. Matthias, lovely to speak to you today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. We have a lot to get through, so I'm going to go straight back to the very beginning. And I know that you're a composer, but you also play the oboe. How did music first come into your life as a child? What was your first musical experiences?
Well, my parents were teachers, so this is the intellectual middle-class bourgeois family where everybody plays an instrument. And so my older brother, he played the violin. My older sister played the piano, and I was too small to play an instrument. So when they played music at home, I wanted to play something, so they gave me a triangle. So that's the beginning of my career.
Wow. but soon the triangle was taken over by something else as you grew up, I'm assuming. Unless you became an international triangle expert, I don't know.
No. Molto espressivo.
Yeah, indeed. So what were the next instruments for you?
Well, then I started the violin, which was not particularly successful. And I tried some other instruments, but I ended up with the oboe, which I then liked very much, and that became my instrument.
And when I read Wikipedia, which, as we know, Matthias is to be totally trusted, the first things it tells me that you studied in Darmstadt and Paris with Boulez and Stockhausen, which I'm assuming was composition. But it also says that you went on to become a professional oboist. So where did you study the oboe, and at what point did composition come into your life as something you thought you might want to take up?
I studied in my native Switzerland. And then when I was 18, I went to Paris to the Conservatoire National Supérieur. And there I was in oboe and chamber music. And then I started also taking composition lessons with Jean Rivier. And also conducting.
Yes.
And so I spent four years in Paris. And then I came back, and then I went to Darmstadt. I must say that during the time in Paris, I had the chance to go to the classes of Messiaen. Messiaen, interestingly enough, was not a teacher for composition, because it's a French system. There were already teachers of composition, so Messiaen couldn't be teacher of composition, but he certainly deserved to have a class. Yeah. So his class was called Analysis. So I was not inscribed at that class, but I was allowed to go and go to those classes, which were very interesting. He was a very multifaceted man, and yes. I kind of profited from that, actually more than from my composition lessons with Jean Rivier.
Yeah.
And then after those 4 pieces, I went to Darmstadt, and then the contact with Boulez and Stockhausen. Yeah. But you know that, I'll give you an example of Boulez. Is of course totally different. The composer Boulez then, and then
Yes.
the conductor Boulez later on. But he would explain something in class for 10 minutes. And then he asked us, "Did you understand?" And we said, "No." Then he laughed and he explained it in 2 sentences and we all understood.
Which begs the question why he did it for 10 minutes the first time.
Because to show his intellectual superiority.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Which he had.
Yes.
There's no doubt.
No, of course. Oh, I mean, while we're on the subject of Boulez, did you ever speak to him about conducting? Because I would imagine that he had very different views. I mean, obviously, he would have shown his intellect as well. But did you ever speak to him about conducting at all?
Not at that point.
No.
No. But of course, I knew Boulez much later.
Yes.
And then also as director of the Lucerne Festival.
Yes, of course. You mentioned that when you were in Paris at the Conservatoire there, you studied conducting then. Who was teaching you at this early stage? I'm assuming these were your first steps into conducting.
And that was very little. I didn't finish my conducting classes there. Learning how to conduct it, I did then when I was assistant in Cleveland.
Of course, yes. Well, before we get there, I want to talk through a life change that you must have experienced. So, having graduated or you've gone to Darmstadt and studied composition, you graduated from Paris as an oboist as well. And from 1965 to 1969, you were the principal oboist of the Salzburg Mozart Orchestra. So you are a professional orchestral oboist.
Well, I have to tell you that, of course, in Europe, to start as a conductor, you have to go as a correpetitor at the opera house.
Yes.
And so I applied. That was in Kassel, which is a big house.
Yeah, it is, yes.
And so that, went to the interview, and then came the piano playing. I play a little bit the piano, but not. Anyway, they gave me a Rosenkavalier, which I couldn't play.
Yeah.
And so I then decided that this is probably not the way to go. I had this facility of playing the oboe. I thought maybe if I go for a few years in an orchestra, I can learn orchestra life and also repertoire and look the conductors from the other side.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned in the email when I first contacted you, I was a violinist in the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, a little longer than 4 years. I did 22 years, but I remember playing for you, for instance, very fondly. But that's definitely a route that some conductors seem to take when the door of repetiteur in an opera house, or that Kapellmeister route is slammed shut. Is to go and play in an orchestra and learn it from within. What do you think you learnt in those 4 years in Salzburg playing that you probably wouldn't have learnt any other way?
It's sitting in an orchestra. And that's an experience that is when I give master classes. At the beginning, I tell them what it is to be an orchestra musician, where the education is as long and as expensive very often as a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But then you're sitting all your life, and there's always one who stands and who tells you what to do.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That psychologically, being an orchestra musician is very tough.
That's true.
I'm not even talking about instrumentally or musically, but to just be locked in that situation is difficult. And it is also what I always say, that when you conduct an orchestra, you have to know that in that orchestra might be musicians that are as good as playing that instrument as you are a conductor.
Absolutely true. Very true.
The mutual respect. And that's what I learned there, with all the frustrations that you have as a young orchestra player who actually didn't want to play in an orchestra, much rather conduct it.
Yeah. So what made you think, right, enough of this oboe playing, enough scraping reeds and all of this, I'm going to go and conduct? What was the decision Was it made for you, or did you just decide, right, I'm shutting my oboe case and I'm going to go for conducting?
I now tell you a fairy tale.
Okay. I like fairy tales.
But it's a true one.
Oh, good.
I had a friend in Salzburg who knew the Vienna Philharmonic. And so, of course, during the festival, all the great conductors, all the great orchestras were there. And so there was George Szell rehearsing the Vienna Philharmonic. And he arranged for me to go to that rehearsal. And I have never, ever heard anything comparable. It was just unbelievable. And so when the rehearsal was finished, I was like still stuck in my seat. And there George Szell comes towards me and looked at me with those eyes. You know, he just looks through you. Unbelievable, intimidating. And he asked me what I was doing. And I said, you know, I'm an oboe player in the orchestra, but I don't want to play the oboe. And he said, what else do you do? I said, well, I would like to be a conductor. I also compose. He says, tomorrow you bring me a composition.
No.
So, which told me that I could go back the next day.
Yeah.
And I brought him a score. He looked at it maybe 2 seconds. And he said, this needs to be a G sharp.
Wow.
You know, he had those eyes.
Yeah.
He just saw. He just knew. He just saw.
Wow.
Anyway, he was kind of intrigued by that. And then I went to the other rehearsals, and then he said, I'll be back next year. See you then. I mean, it's a fairy tale, I tell you.
Wow. That's unbelievable, isn't it? That you happen to be sat there, he came and chatted to you, and then there is a link, there is a bond, and somebody like that, you know, I mean, he was a massive figure at that time, wasn't he?
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, a year later, I went, and he again came to me. He remembered every word we spoke a year early.
Wow.
And then we talk more about conducting. And then at the dress rehearsal at the end, he said, if you want to come to Cleveland for a year, you can come, but I cannot pay you.
Yeah.
So in Salzburg, I had an American girlfriend who said, with all the foundations in America, if George Szell gives you a recommendation, they all pay for your year. So we did that she wrote for me this application at the Ford Foundation, and I got the money. And well, she did this for me, so I had to marry her after that.
Oh,
actually, you know what? I'm still married to her.
Oh, wow. That's what a wonderful story. That's 2 fairy tales, Matthias. So that really is.
Well, as you know, in my profession, I'm far behind what women is concerned. Anyway, so we went to Cleveland, and I had this year with George Szell. I was not the only one. I was a conducting fellow.
Yes.
There was a resident conductor called Louis Lane. Then there was 2 assistant conductors. One was Michael Cherry, the other one Jimmy Levine. And then I came then.
Yes.
At the end, of course, I practically didn't know conducting. I made my debut conducting one piece in a children's concert of Jimmy Levine.
Yeah. Wow.
But of course, I was exposed to, you know, the greatest music making, and to be a year with that orchestra, it just gives you an idea of what an orchestra should sound ideally. But anyway, shall I go on?
Yes, please. Yeah, yeah.
Because there are other fairy tales.
Oh, well, this is great. I mean, just butting in very quickly about Cleveland at that point. I mean, they were a race car of an orchestra, weren't they, under Szell? how he'd rehearsed them. I mean, the documentaries I've seen and the clips of rehearsals and the way they played, they were at the top of their game then, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That was the first orchestra in America. There was no doubt of that.
Oh,
And he also, but everybody says he was never better than before he died.
mm,
You can listen to some recordings where that is very, how should I say, straight.
yeah.
And he mellowed a lot as an old man. That was the last year of his life that I was with him.
And you say that he was at the top of his game. There was no decline.
No,
No, yeah,
no, whatsoever.
yeah. And what did he teach you? What? I mean, was it just being around him rehearsing and?
It was being around him.
Yeah.
Because he was very busy. He then started a job with the New York Philharmonic because Bernstein left.
Yes.
So he took over a fair amount of New York Philharmonic. Also, he was principal guest conductor of the Concertgebouw. So he was a very busy man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, amazing. Well, I'm interested now to know about fairy tale number 2 or 3, depending on your points of view.
This is actually a good story.
Yeah.
When I then married this American girl, and we bought a Volkswagen van, put all our music and records and books and whatever in there, and we drove to Le Havre, and there we took the Queen Elizabeth to go to America.
Yeah.
And I was so excited to start my new life that I couldn't go. I couldn't wait to go and be in America, be with this orchestra, and that all those wonderful things that are waiting for me. And so I was stuck for 3.5 days on that stupid boat where there was nothing to do. And I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated that I read the passenger list. Imagine.
Wow. That is boredom. Yeah.
That bored I was.
Yeah.
Until I came to the name Mr. L. Stokowski.
And he was on board with you. Wow.
And so my wife said, you know what? Is it possible that he's as bored as you are? Let's write him a note.
Yeah.
And so she helped me write a note, and we gave it to a butler. We went for lunch. When we came back, there was a note in the door where it says, sorry, I missed you. Call me at 3:00, Leopold Stokowski.
Wow.
There was just one problem. I didn't speak any English at that time. So I said to her, how can I call him? Then my wife said, it is also possible you knock on his door. That can also be called. So that's what I did. So I knocked on the door. He opens. Come in. So I told him that where I was going, and he says, yes, very good orchestra. George Szell, very good conductor, but strange ideas about Boeings. Now, you, as a violin player, you will appreciate that. You know,
absolutely,
that free Boeings.
Yes, all the time,
And so George Szell was very careful with the Boeing. So he thought George Szell has strange ideas about Boeings. Anyway, then I went to Cleveland. But when I then was looking for something else, I heard from a friend that Stokowski was looking for an assistant conductor. And I thought, I know him.
Yeah.
So I applied, and I was invited to go and conduct. There were, I don't know how many, there were various sessions where we could conduct a piece of our own choice of 8 minutes, not more, which means 1 minute to walk on stage, 8 minutes to conduct, 1 minute to walk off. So it's always 10.
Yeah.
So I asked my friend, I said, what is his favorite music? What does he like?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I heard him do Shostakovich Fifth Symphony.
Mm.
And coming from Boulez and Stockhausen, Shostakovich was not my cup of tea, you can imagine.
Mm.
So I decided, in spite of that, to take the last movement of Shostakovich Fifth Symphony. And I did what any young conductor does. I learned the piece, of course, by memory.
Mm.
And so that I could cue any instrument. I was like a policeman,
Yeah, I know.
So I go to New York. There's all those young conductors standing around, so forth. And then it was my turn, and I walk on stage, and I see that all the strings players were on my left. First flute is where the cello is, behind the oboe, clarinet, bassoon. The brass was also on the right side in the back. None of my cues worked.
Of course they wouldn't. No. That's almost like he'd found out you'd learnt your cues and decided to seat the orchestra completely differently. Oh, that's wonderful.
Anyway, then I was told by the orchestra manager, said, call Maestro Stokowski at 3:00.
Mm.
And gave me the number. And so I called him, and he said, yeah, we would like to have you as an assistant conductor. And I said, this is fantastic, and thank you so much. So when should I start? He says, next season.
Mm.
So next December, I go to New York. I was in Europe for the summer, and I go to Carnegie Hall to the first rehearsal, and I go to him, and he says, what's your name? I said, Matthias Bammert. He said, spell it. And I spelled it. Then he says, are you a conductor? I said, yes, I'm actually your assistant conductor. Oh. He was then 88, and
Yes,
the memory was not that great anymore. Anyway, I had to introduce and spell my name for at least a month.
and again, you're just watching another one of the legendary maestros rehearsing, performing. Even at this age, I'm assuming there was so much you could get from watching him.
Well, he was old,
Yeah.
but there were moments that were absolutely unbelievable.
Mm. Mm.
And he, as a person, was fascinating. He had no memory, but the way he could get around, what he still liked a lot was after the concert to go to the green rooms, and all his old ladies, friends and fans were there.
Mm.
And he always gave an encore, one of his things. And I remember that one day he did something, an orchestration of some little Haydn piece. It is not for him, a 5-minute charming piece. So in the green room after the concert, all the ladies, there's a young man, a student, and he came and says, Maestro, this piece at the end is by Haydn. It's by Haydn. And he says, yes. What is the opus number? Well, I knew that is not a thing to ask him. He wouldn't remember it.
No.
So Stokowski looked at him and said, how could you like the piece if you did not know the opus number?
Oh,
and
wonderful.
the young man left very quickly.
Oh, superb. Well, the next name that crops up is another massive name, and you went on then to become resident conductor back at Cleveland under Lorin Maazel. Did you, as a resident conductor, did that mean that you now had a title position, and you were not required to go and assist Maazel, or was there a working relationship like that?
Oh yeah, but Marcel was.
Yeah.
I must say that after this year with Stokowski, then Cleveland asked me to come back. They liked me, or also I was the last conductor that George Searle invited. In the first, they asked me to be assistant conductor and not conducting fellow, assistant conductor. So Laurent Marcel gave me always 1 year contracts because he wanted to get his own assistant conductor, not the one from George Searle.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went on 3 years with 1 year contracts. And then Detroit asked me to become resident conductor, at which point I then got a contract and became resident conductor in Cleveland. But he was a difficult man to work with.
Okay, yeah.
Very impressive again.
Yes. Well, I mean, the one thing I know about him that maybe you can verify, but apparently he had a photographic memory. Is that correct? And would even rehearse from memory, which is just staggering.
Not everything, but
right.
Yeah, he had a fantastic memory, he had a fantastic ear, he had a fantastic baton.
Yeah.
But he was not a nice man. I tell you a story that will surprise you. Mr. Solemnis. And so we had a rehearsal, and then of course we have concerts for Thursday and Saturday. So of course on Friday night was kind of the dress rehearsal, because this was an amateur chorus. They wouldn't come to the dress rehearsal on Thursday morning. So he did the run through and the rehearsal on Thursday night with everybody. And it was 10 o'clock, and there were maybe 5 minutes left of Missa Solemnis, and the orchestra stood up and walked out. Comes the dress rehearsal next morning. Some of the soloists wanted to do a little bit of singing,
yes,
but after half an hour was finished. So he was sitting on this chair. After an hour, he said, "Let's take a break." Nobody played for half an hour.
Yeah.
So after a break, everybody came back. He sits in his chair until 1 o'clock. I don't know any conductor in the world who would have the guts to do this.
He just sat there and made the orchestra sit there.
To make the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty staggering, isn't it?
They didn't love him, I tell you.
Yeah. So yeah, there are things there that you learned not to do when you went out to become a music director.
No, but let's be fair. I learned a lot from him.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, he had a fantastic technique.
Yeah.
Amazing. But he can do, without having to say anything. And also, what conducting is, you can solve problems before they happen.
Absolutely.
And he was a master in that.
So, 1977, for the first time, you become music director of the Swiss Radio Orchestra, and also you're music director of the London Motor Players for 7 years as well. Principal guest in Glasgow with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. I'm going to jump on slightly because whilst you're with RSNO, you were festival director of a contemporary music festival called Musica Nova, and you also mentioned earlier on that you were festival director of Lucerne Festival between 92 and 98. I wonder what you could tell us about being a festival director, what it entails. I mean, especially Lucerne, such an international festival, and you were also in charge before or during the time they opened the new hall, the amazing new hall on the lakeside there.
Yeah, we did then.
Yeah. What's it like being a festival director? Did it take a lot of time away from your conducting career and duties elsewhere around the world?
I tried to keep that to a minimum.
Yeah.
First, when they asked me to do that, I said, I'm not a festival director. I don't know how to run a festival.
Yeah.
Where should I learn that? And so they did insist. And then I thought, as a conductor, I don't know how to play all those instruments,
No.
but I know how to motivate, to manipulate, whatever you call it,
Yeah.
the people who know how to do that.
Mm.
I know how to inspire, motivate people who know how to run the festival.
Mm.
And then I said, yes, I will do it. I will do the artistic side. And this is very clever in Luzern. They said, no, 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 we don't have an artistic director and a business director. That has to be one person.
Mm.
Because if the artistic director wants to spend money and the business director wants to save money, and so it's already programmed that this is going to be a fight.
Yes.
We have one person who's responsible for everything. And so I said, okay, I do it if I can delegate everything that not I have to do. I do only what only I can do, and everything else I delegate. And I had a very good staff there, very motivated, and that worked well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful festival. I'm sure we went there. City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra went there during your time
Yes,
with Simon Rattle. I remember you being there and coming out on stage and giving us a welcome speech. I'm pretty sure that was the case.
yes, of course.
And there is no place on the planet quite like Lucerne in the summer when you go there on the during the festival. It's a wonderful place to make music. Superb hall. I mean, of course, us in Birmingham, we sort of could understand how the hall worked because it's the same architects who built
Acoustician,
acoustician. Yeah, sorry, it's the same acoustician, Russell Johnson.
Russell Johnson,
Yeah,
Artec.
Artec, who did the Dallas Hall and then Symphony Hall in Birmingham and then KKL in Lucerne. But yeah, what a wonderful experience that must have been. Probably rather stressful, I would imagine, making sure that you had all of these international artists coming and on board.
Yeah, but with the concert hall, we had a very famous architect, Jean Nouvel,
Mm.
and we had a very famous acoustician.
Mm.
And of course, architects, they would like to build their buildings, and then at the end, the acoustician comes and makes a good acoustic.
Mm.
Today, people know that is not the way it is done. That, I mean, the shape of the hall, the size of the hall, everything has something to do with acoustics.
Yeah, yeah.
And so those two men were fighting. And I don't know how many times I was woken up in the middle of the night because, of course, Russell Johnson was in New York and trying to straighten them out. But it was not easy. But the result justified everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely wonderful hall.
It is. What I love about it also, I mean, not only the inside and the architecture, but when you're coming round the lake, when you're walking around the lake from where the Transport Museum is towards the city of Lucerne and the main city, this slice of roof sort of cuts through. You can see it from almost everywhere on the lake, and it's a staggeringly beautiful thing. To put that there, and it sort of makes a focal point before you get to the famous covered bridge and all of the other Lucerne attractions. That thing, that building really does make a statement, doesn't it? And yeah, it's a wonderful place.
You know that where it is built now.
Yes.
That is actually that the ground belongs to the city. And so the people of Lucerne had to vote whether the city is allowed to sell this or give this for the concert hall. And when I took over the festival was not very popular with the population of Lucerne, because they had the impression they had nothing to do with Lucerne. It was just for rich people. And so my job was to change the image of the festival for the people of Lucerne. And so I made, within the festival, all kinds of, I made a street music festival. I made an amateur music festival. I made a gypsy music festival where we had gypsies from all over the world. And that kind of opened, and the population of Luzern then realized that actually that festival is also for them. So that the vote was positive, and we could then build that hall.
Bravo you. That's wonderful. I'm going to go back to your conducting career now, and there's I'm going to list on one side of my page. I've got a whole list of orchestras, and then on the other side of my page, I've got another whole list of orchestras. And I wonder whether you could tell me about what differences you might find. So, I mean, between 2002 and 2005, you were principal guest on the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. 03 and 06, chief conductor of Western Australian Symphony Orchestra. 05 and 08, Malaysian Philharmonic chief, and you're currently chief of Sapporo Symphony Orchestra and Daejeon in Philharmonic Orchestra in South Korea. Versus the fact that you've conducted in America, you've conducted in Europe, as I said, London Mozart Players, Royal Scottish National Orchestra, RPO Associate Guest, BBC Orchestras, BBC Philharmonic recordings I know and love, plus CBSO. When you go and work in places like Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, I mean, Malaysia is different because that was a very international orchestra anyway, but when you work in Sapporo and South Korea, what's the working practices of the orchestra like compared to your homeland in Switzerland or in Europe or the US? Do you find much of a difference between how they work in rehearsals and how they play?
Very much so. In Sapporo, when I rehearse, nobody speaks. So, I'm spoiled.
Yeah.
Then when I come to other orchestras, and Sapporo, they know that they have to come prepared.
Yes.
In South Korea, need to convince them.
Yeah.
But in Sapporo, it's very clear that the job of the conductor is not to teach them the notes.
Yes.
They know that. So we have a very happy relationship.
Yeah.
Well, you realize I conducted them last time in January.
Yes, yes.
And if I'm lucky, next time in January, next January.
Well, that's the crazy thing, isn't it? That we're basically, I've done a couple of weeks' work, but not very much. And it's going to be about 12 months off, just hiatus from what we were all doing beforehand. This mad flying around the world and looking at those, the orchestras that you have a position with now and where you live and other places you work regularly. Before COVID, we were flying around like lunatics. What do you think it's going to be like in the future? Or at least in the near future? And do you think we'll get back to what we were doing before?
No. One thing, I worry about the orchestras in the States.
Yeah.
Because they're not really subsidized. So they're private people, mainly old people who have the money.
Yeah.
Many of them died. Many of them are afraid to go to concerts. And, if New York Philharmonic is closed until next summer.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe they have, there's a lot of money in New York, but many other orchestras, I don't know how they can survive.
No.
The other thing is, we in Europe, we have subsidized orchestras. And, all those politicians see how the musicians sit home, do nothing. I don't know how much they are eager to subsidize that.
Well, in the UK, for instance, there was a protest recently because about a third of musicians in the UK are freelance and are getting nothing, no support at all from the government. And there are people leaving the profession already. There are people
I read about that. That's terrible.
Yeah, they're either emigrating to mainland Europe, to France or to Germany, or they're just not playing anymore and they're taking up other jobs, or they're studying to be something else, or because they can't see a way out of it and they're not being subsidized.
I don't see. It will be better than what we have now. But this has really not only music, it's a big shock for culture.
I think I read this morning when I did my homework, Matthias, that you've now made over 80 recordings with various orchestras around the world. A lot of the ones I know are with the BBC Philharmonic, for instance. What is it about recordings that you enjoy? I know some conductors don't like recording, or they call it a snapshot of where they are at the time. What do you like about it?
You know, when I took over the London Mozart Players, then Chandos, my record company, said, you know, when Mozart do you want to record? And I thought of a long, long time. And I came to the conclusion that Mozart is over-recorded.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have record stores anymore.
No.
We used to have record stores. If you would take the Jupiter Symphony, you would have 40 choices.
Yes, yeah.
And I had this idea about the contemporaries of Mozart. Now we are talking about 1991. And that, you know, most people knew the classical period with three composers, you know, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven. But there were composers all over Europe. And so I had the idea to make a series of records, the contemporaries of Mozart. And I found this really, really interesting because I think I understand Mozart better. And also Mozart in context with the world around him. And I found this very interesting. I think I understand Mozart better. It's also, you know, there were some very, very good composers, but most of them have a nice melody and an accompaniment. Very nice. If you see Mozart also, I mean, this is known, his music became too complicated for the people, for the audience. And if you take the Jupiter Symphony in the last movement, you don't really know what is accompaniment and what is melody.
Well, is there any accompaniment? I mean, it's all...
Yeah.
There's that famous bit where everything's going on at once in a double and triple and fugue, and you just, how are you doing that? Yeah.
I think the complexity is a big difference between Mozart and his contemporaries.
Yes, yeah.
There were others. I enjoyed Korngold.
Yes.
He's an amazing composer.
Well, I think that's where I first heard one of your recordings with the BBC Philharmonic. There is a set of Korngold discs or CDs, and I'm a massive Korngold fan, and I think that his name has sort of suffered from, you know, the career path he ended up taking, because he had to leave Europe in 1939 or 1938 and ended up writing music for movies. But it, you know, why should his other music, the stuff he wrote between the age of 11 and the day he left to go to the US, be forgotten or less played? Because it's amazing music.
But you know, when he went to Hollywood, he didn't know that this was still the beginning of film. Because in the opera, the composer is the most important thing.
Wow. He
didn't know that in film, the composer is not the important thing.
No.
He had to find that out.
Yeah, that's right. And I know that it's when you hear people say, "Oh, that his music sounds like film music." I always point out to them, no. Film music sounds like Korngold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I recorded that Sinfonietta.
Yes.
Big piece that he composed when he was 15.
Yeah. Oh, but it's in B major, isn't it?
There you have Hollywood. But that's before Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, years before. Yeah, exactly. I have one more question I'd like to ask before we do the 10 questions. Matthias, this is a question I ask all of the conductors because everybody finds it interesting, but especially the conducting geeks and the conducting students. And it's about score preparation. You've conducted a lot of new music, but also, you know, weird and wonderful and everything in between. when you get a new score, how do you learn it? Do you start with an overall big picture and then come in smaller and smaller and smaller? Or do you start at the beginning and work your way through? And are you somebody who writes a lot of things in your scores? Are you like me? Do you use red, blue, and black, or do you like to keep your scores pristine, white, and virginal? What's your overall approach to score prep?
First, my scores have nothing in it.
Okay. Yeah.
When I get a new piece, maybe because I have been a composer, I analyze it.
Yes.
First the form, then the harmony, and if you have a thorough analysis, then you already know a lot of the piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, you have to make a performance. You have to say something about the piece.
Yes.
You know what? During this time where we're all stuck home,
Yes.
I did enjoy not so much learning music, but relearning music.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Pieces I have conducted many times.
Mm.
And, when we're a professional conductor and you do a piece, you pick up a score that you have done several times and it goes fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's wonderful to go back and think about it.
Yeah, like rereading a story that but then this time reading every word again rather than skip reading.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I, for one, and I know quite a lot of conductors, when COVID hit in March, I stopped looking at scores at all. I didn't look at any because I found the process. All my scores were laid out on my desk in programs waiting to be performed. And when all of those concerts got cancelled or postponed and I put the scores back on the shelf, it depressed me too much to start to want to look at other music. But now I'm doing much as you are, now I'm starting to get the odd little concert coming in. I'm starting to reopen scores and think, really, I'm going to really relearn this again and take some time over it because I have some time. Yeah.
Relearn. We know it already, but it going deeper into it.
Yes, exactly.
And that's I enjoy that very much.
Brilliant. Is there anything you wish to talk about anything in your career at all before I go on to the 10 questions? Because
there's one thing we didn't talk about.
Yes.
Which I don't know, which about my work with television.
I don't know about your work with television. Where do you do that?
When I came to the Swiss Radio Orchestra after Cleveland.
Ah, all right, okay.
And we had that situation where in Switzerland, radio and television, like the BBC, is all one organization. Yeah. And television had ads.
Right.
And the radio had no ads.
Yeah.
So television was rich, radio was poor. But the radio had the orchestra.
Yes.
So they decided that television should give some money to the radio.
Right.
And they can then use that orchestra if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there was a new head of the music department of television and a young new director. And we got ourselves together. I was just new at the job. And we said, let's do something. And one thing we didn't believe in was just take pictures of a concert.
Yeah.
Because the broadcasting of music on television is done like a football game. If you see the ball, then everybody's happy. Yes, and if you see the clarinet, when the clarinet plays, everybody's happy. And when you say the violins and interesting is that when you have a loud bit, which mechanically very active, you show the whole orchestra.
That's right. Yeah.
Which visually, there's nothing. I mean, the millimeters that the bows go, visually is nothing going on. Yeah. And then when it's very soft, you show a violin close, with big bow movement, which is visually the opposite from what you hear.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So we tried to do something totally different. We had this orchestra, which we could use for weeks.
Yeah.
And we started filming. We would pre-record the music.
Yeah.
And then film, 5 seconds, 7 seconds, and we would pipe in the music, and I would rehearse the musicians so it's absolutely synchronized with the sound, and then we could make the perfect picture. Not the musician who scratches himself or is unconcentrated. So you could make the perfect picture. And it's a long story. I make it very short. Anyway, since we pre-recorded it and then filmed it, an orchestra didn't need to be sitting like an orchestra. If the flute plays with the cello, you show the flute next to the cello. One step, or the geography has changed. The other thing is when the musicians had to rehearse 5 times 5 bars with me, they knew it by memory.
Yes.
So we didn't need music stands anymore. With all the music on television, most musicians you don't see.
No.
So we had no music stands anymore. Next step, where are the musicians looking at when they're playing memory?
Yes.
By memory. They was terribly unconcentrated. So we had to make up stories. So they would act whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so we did a whole series of that. And we got a Grammy nomination for that.
That sounds wonderful. Can you still see these anywhere? Are they on YouTube or places like that?
I think there are some.
No, I shall be looking them up the minute I finish talking to you.
It was stunning at the moment because it was so new.
Yes, yeah.
It exhausted itself because it was so different.
Yeah.
You could not do it over and over and over again. But it was a fun time, and also did some children's concerts.
Oh well, I mentioned for that was amazing. For children's concerts, they would lap that up because there's none of the formality of seeing an orchestra laid out in its rows and music stands, and when they can watch a TV program and as you say, you have a trumpet player sitting next to a viola player or whatever playing the same music, then it can fire their imagination.
Yeah.
I mean, the only contemporary thing I can think of, there's an orchestra in London called the Aurora Orchestra that once a year for the BBC Proms they play a major symphony from memory, and they've started doing things. Last year they did the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique, and they were people were coming and walking in and standing like you were doing, standing next to people and then disappearing, and then people like coming in and out of the orchestra because there were no music stands. But you cannot do it any other way.
But this is a difficult piece to memorize for the orchestra.
Yes, I know. Yeah. They've done many. Well, as I said, the Proms once every year. This year they did Beethoven 7. It was Berlioz last year. I think they've done Shostakovich 9 as well.
Yeah. How many rehearsals do they have?
Well, now that's the question. I don't know. The conductor Nick Collon was in an earlier episode of the podcast, and my memory is not good as remembering how many rehearsals they have, but they do have a lot. But the thing is, I think they, much like you were talking about in Sapporo, they know they have to be prepared for the first rehearsal, so that they know what the piece is many months in advance. The players, so they have to practice, get it at least to, nearly memorized before they even start the first rehearsal. Before they do all of the other stuff. That sounds wonderful. I should be definitely finding those on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing those. That's brilliant. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really good.
At one point in my life, this was important.
Matthias, it is 10 questions time, and I'll start at the beginning with what sound or noise do you love and what sound or noise do you hate?
I like many things that have something to do with nature.
Yes.
Like I have a nice house here in Ticino, in the southern part of Switzerland, and we have a river next to the house, and this is a lovely sound. So it's a very peaceful when I go to bed. And then we have lots of birds.
Yeah.
I mean that's it's very peaceful. I find construction sites are absolutely horrendous.
Yes. Yeah.
If you have something like that next to your house, I hate it.
Brilliant answers. And I have to say, Ticino is a wonderful part of the world. Oh, it's so beautiful there.
It is.
My wife and I and the children and my mother and father and my mother-in-law, we take 2 cars every year. We haven't done it this year. We drive from Birmingham in the UK all the way to Abruzzo in Italy. And I think on at least 2 of the occasions we've done it, and we've driven very close to Ticino, either going north or going south, going home or going to the and it's just a wonderful part of the world. It's a very dangerous place to drive because I'm too busy looking at mountains and hills and castles on the top of hills and things like that.
Well, considering that I have no chance to conduct at the moment, if you have to be somewhere, this is certainly a wonderful place to be.
If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
We have a very big garden. I read a lot.
Yes.
And
a day in your big garden reading sounds wonderful.
No, I clip bushes and weed and do things like that.
Who would be a favorite conductor of yesteryear?
I'll give you 2. One is the most obvious one, which is George Sale.
Yes, yeah.
The other one is one I have worked with quite a bit, is Claudio Abbado.
Yes, yeah. Well, he was linked with Lucerne, obviously, for many, many, many years.
We did Gruppen together several times.
Oh, wow. Who was the third conductor? Can you remember?
In Vienna, it was James Judd. In Chicago, it was Henry Mazer, who was the resident conductor. That was not very good, but
oh, well, superb choices. Zell, I'm not surprised by, and Abbado, of course. Yeah, what a legendary conductor.
Very different, very different.
And now to the question that a lot of conductors don't like. And again, you can give more than one answer. And who would be a favorite current conductor?
And I give 2 again.
Yes, yeah.
Also very different. One is Esa-Pekka Salonen. In the school of George Sale.
Yes, yeah. I hadn't thought about it, but yes.
The other one is Gustavo Dudamel. In the school of Claudio.
Yes, yeah. Very similar baton grip.
Yes.
I hate using that word because it's not, we don't grip the baton, but baton hold. But you know what I mean. It's very, very similar, the way he approaches the baton and the use of the baton. What is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
But that's a situation that made it hard. And
okay, yeah.
I was an assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, and I had to take over Mahler's Second Symphony at 2 hours' notice, and I've never conducted it before.
Yeah, well, that makes it hard. Wow.
But I have to tell you, I conducted the backstage music, stage music, which means I couldn't see what Lorin Maazel was conducting. I was backstage.
Yes.
That was scary.
Yeah, I bet. And there's one particular bit, because I've rehearsed Mahler 2 for Andrew Nelson's once, and for somebody else. I've rehearsed it twice, but I've never performed it. There is the flute and offstage horns bit at the beginning of the finale, which I still not sure I conduct correctly. Maybe one day I'll work it out. But yeah, it's a tough one if you want to answer.
If you're backstage, so I've done it for various. I've done it for Bernstein. I've done it for Ormandy. I've done it for Cloud. For Cell.
Yeah.
Then I've conducted the symphony when I knew it.
Oh, brilliant answer.
With more than 2 hours notice.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant answer. Number 7, we're rattling through them. And just to remind you, you're not allowed to say passport, baton, phone, or score as the answer. When travelling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
Well, you know that I'm Swiss.
Yes.
The Swiss Army knife.
Ah, yes. There's one sitting right next to me on my desk. Yeah.
You know that there's all what you can do besides a knife. There is also a screwdriver. There is a bottle opener. There's all kinds of things that you need when you're traveling.
Brilliant answer.
But it's a question of habit, you know.
Yes.
As a boy in Switzerland, you get that knife and it stays with you all your life.
What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
It's something I feel relatively strongly about. You know, when you're a young conductor and you get a concert, then they always tell you what to conduct. That's okay. As a young conductor, most of the pieces you do for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm always disappointed when, as an old conductor, works that I know, that I have done, that I feel strongly about, that I feel I have something to say about, I would like to conduct those. But if at my age, they still think they have to make programs for me, I don't like it.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Yeah, I think if they're going to book Matthias Bamet, they should book him to conduct whatever he wants to conduct.
or at least being negotiable.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
My owns. I mean, I have been oboist, I've been a composer,
yes.
I have been a conductor, I've been a festival director, I've been a co-producer of television.
Yeah. Well, one more. Go on. What else?
I am fascinated by history.
I
would like to be a historian. I would have to know more, but you know, such a big field. But that is interesting.
And in any particular direction of history, I mean, not just musical history, is there a part of history that fascinates you more than any other?
Not modern history. No. I like the Middle Ages.
If the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
I would like to have a sushi in a good sushi bar in Tokyo. But I'm not allowed to go there, you know.
You are. It's a fantasy question. It's the last night.
I would have to go into quarantine.
And would you have a Japanese beer with it, or some sake, or both?
Both.
Both, of course. Yeah. Matthias, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you for the last hour or so. And I hope very soon I can see you again.
Yes, well, you're very good with your questions. Very easy to talk to you.
Good, thank you.
We'll do it again.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat with a young British conductor who, after studying in Scotland, Germany and Switzerland, won the 2017 Nestle and Salzburg Festival Young Conductors Award, and 2 years later, in 2019, became chief conductor of the Tiroler Symphony Orchestra Innsbruck in Austria. But until then, bye-bye.